welcome back to another YouTube video. Today's video is a fun one because we are talking about New York City stereotypes and whether they're true or not. And I thought that this would be a fun one because I know that we talk a lot about New York City on my channel, and so many of you guys have told me that you've either been thinking about visiting New York or moving here. So I know before you come to visit for the first time or before you decide to even move here, a lot of times we hear so many stereotypes about specific places, especially famous cities like New York, in our heads, and I think that it's important to debunk some of these myths or talk about if they are true and why, so that if you are visiting you can make sure that you have the most pleasant time. And then just quickly, in case anybody is new here, my name is Taylor and I live here in New York City. I have an apartment, like a little studio in Nolita, and I've lived in New York for the past like 5 to 7 years. It depends on how you count it. I kind of had a soft move, but regardless, I have been here for a number of years and I've learned a lot about living in the city. And if you are new here, definitely don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. It would really mean a lot to me, so yes. The first stereotype about New Yorkers and New York in general is that it's very fast-paced and that New Yorkers are impatient. And I would say that this is definitely true. New York as a city is one where there's hundreds of thousands of people who are traveling in and out of the city every day via trains, subways, buses, cars, bikes, and people are just trying to get to work, and at the end of the day they're just trying to get home as soon as possible so that they can relax, and it really is just that rush. And so because of that, if somebody is, say if you're visiting and you're, a tourist exploring the city and you don't have that same kind of mindset, then New Yorkers might grow a little bit impatient because, say for example, if you are walking 5 people in a line and you're blocking the sidewalk and people can't get past you, then they're not going to be very happy about that. Or if, say, for example, you're waiting in line at a coffee shop and you get to the front of the line and you don't know what you're going to order and you're holding up the line, New Yorkers are going to be a little bit frustrated with you because the city just has a flow. Everyone moves quickly, everyone kind of just decides quickly when they're in lines and moves on to the next thing. So a lot of times when tourists or just anyone really kind of breaks that flow, that's when New Yorkers do start to get a little bit impatient. So yeah, that one is kind of true. Also, side note, I'm sorry if you can hear any background noise. I am using my little microphone today, so hopefully that gets rid of that, but I have my window open today, mostly because it's these New York City apartments, like you can't control the heating and it gets like 100 degrees in here. But yeah, there's some birds chirping outside. It's like spring is coming. I'm really excited. It's like the first little signs of spring. But anyways, just wanted to say if you can hear any birds chirping, cars honking, any loud city noises, which we'll get into as well. Alright, the next stereotype is that New Yorkers, everyone wears black. Okay, that is not entirely true. Yes, if you go out to a crowded area, especially in the winter time, you will see a sea of black clothes, black puffer jackets, basically head to toe black. Yeah, for sure. There are tons of people that do wear black. But that is not to say that everyone wears black or that there is one type of style or one type of dressing. That's actually my favorite thing about New York City, is how many different styles there are, because you have so many people coming here from all over the world who have chosen to live here, and everyone has a different style. There's not, I remember I used to, like when I was younger, I used to think like, oh, New York was in general this like grunge style, and I'm not very grunge, so I would never fit in there, and whatever. But that's not the truth at all. You have basically every single type of ways of dressing, styles, and I've seen so many New Yorkers play around with color, like wearing bright colored jackets, or just, it's a very fashion-y city. That's one of the reasons why I love it, but it's a very fashion-y city. So at the end of the day, if you're someone who is traveling here either to visit or to live, you do not need to change anything about your wardrobe because everything is accepted here. The next stereotype about New York City that I hear a lot is that there's rats everywhere. Technically there are rats everywhere. I think there's some some really scary statistic about the number of rats that there are technically in New York City, but you rarely ever see them. If you take the subway a lot and you want to look into the subway track, yeah, you probably will see a rat or two, but they're far away from you and they're way down there. It's not like, I don't know anybody that's ever had a scenario where they have had like a rat literally come straight up to them. I mean, I think there are some horror stories of that, but it's not like it happens all the time or anything. I will say, if you are walking on the street and you see a bunch of trash bags, because in New York everyone leaves their trash on the side of the street and the garbage truck comes to pick it up, the rats like to hang out around those little piles of trash, so just don't walk closely to those because you might see a rat run out. But other than that, it's not like there's rats everywhere. The next stereotype or myth about New York City, or New Yorkers in general, is that they are unfriendly or rude. And I have to say that that is not true, that's definitely a myth. If, say, you stop someone on the street and you ask them for directions and they ignore you, it might not be because they don't like you. It's just because in New York there are a lot of people who, say, stop you to trying to sell you things, or people with mental health issues who are yelling and screaming, and if you interact with these people you might just attract some unwanted attention. So because of that, a lot of New Yorkers have just been trained to just walk, not make eye contact. When someone stops you and says hey on the streets, you just completely just don't even look at them, because there's a high chance that it's not a situation that you want to be in or talk to. So because of that, so if you say hey and then you're just simply a nice person asking for directions and someone ignores you, it's not because, you can't take it personally, because it's not because of they, don't like you or anything. It's just because of the way that New York is. But if you say like, hey, I'm a tourist, I just need directions, then 1000% somebody will stop. I've myself have stopped many times to give directions, and New Yorkers are really happy to do that, because at the end of the day, we're really proud of the city that we live in, and I think a lot of people also pride themselves in knowing the city by heart. So I think a lot of us are really proud when we can tell people like, oh yeah, just go a couple blocks this way and that way, once you hit this and then that. I think we get proud to show that like we know the city. So yeah, I mean, definitely ask someone for directions if you don't know the way, especially if you're traveling from another country and maybe you don't have service on your phone to look at Google Maps. That happened to me the other day. There was this really sweet couple with a baby who was traveling from Europe and they didn't have service on their phone, and they're like, can you just show, and I was like, absolutely. So New Yorkers in general are really nice. I'll also tell you one other story just to prove this point that New Yorkers are really sweet, and this was something that it always stood out to me in my head when in the first couple years that I moved here, that wow, okay, New Yorkers actually are just good people. That's not to say there's good people and there's bad people everywhere, of course, like every other city, but I definitely wouldn't say that New York is particularly unfriendly. So we were on the subway. I was just on the subway by myself going to work in the morning, just typical commute, and there was a girl in the subway who wasn't feeling well. She started to say like, I think I'm gonna faint, I really don't feel well, and there was this man on the subway who was so sweet to help her like safely get off of the subway car and waited with her in the subway stop until somebody came for help. I don't know if, I can't remember exactly, she had some type of a medical issue, and this guy was being so sweet to her, and I remember thinking like, wow, this guy's gonna be late to work. He doesn't even know this girl. These were two complete strangers, and yet he was so kind to take the time out of his day to help her. So I don't know, that always stuck out in my mind. And also I always see on the subway people holding the door for each other, like people that they don't even know, so that they can make it on the car in time before it goes. So yeah, I mean, it's just like any other city. There's nice people everywhere and there's some not nice people everywhere, but in general, New Yorkers are really friendly. And another thing just on this topic, like, I always thought, oh, it's such a big city. When you're in a small town, you know everyone, and when you go into a store, people remember you. When you go into a store in New York City, people remember you too. It's not as big of a world as you think it is. I used to go to this one smoothie place every morning. in one of my old offices, which was in Midtown, which is the busiest part of the city, and I was shocked when they remembered my order in the morning. And I know plenty of people who regularly go to the same coffee shop and they remember their orders. Or even like clothing stores that I've visited around here in Soho, some of the sales associates, I mean, like obviously it depends on the store. Like if you go to a really nice store like Chanel or Dior, you have your sales associate that you work with. But I just mean in general, like just people who consistently work at the stores, they have the same schedule and you go in often, and like sometimes they'll remember you, and it's just like, wow, it's not as big of a world as you think it is, and you really truly can make the city feel like home. The birds are chirping and it's a little bit warmer out today. I'm really excited for the springtime. But anyways, the next myth is that New York is expensive, and yep, that is true. That doesn't mean that you have to be rich to live here. It's not only very wealthy people that live here. There's people that live here with all sorts of incomes. But if you do want to have, say, a really big apartment in Manhattan, then you are going to have some money to be able to afford that. New York, especially Manhattan, is an island, so there's very clear borders around it, and that in a small space that everybody from all around the world wants to live in. So because of this supply and demand, of course, there's going to be a higher rent price or higher prices to buy apartments here. But so many people decide to live here because they really want to, and it's all about the location and the city being like your playground. So even though the apartments are tiny and expensive and the drinks are $20, we do it because we love it. And you have so many young, successful, driven people here that are willing to pay for these prices. So yeah, I just think, I don't know, it does add up. It is an expensive city. But that's not to say that you can't make it work. So many people will move here when they're first starting out their careers. I did myself, and there's parts of the city that you can live in. Say if you live like way out in Brooklyn and you have multiple roommates, you can definitely find an affordable apartment and then just commute into the city. It's going to be more time on the subway back and forth, but if you're willing to do it and you really want it, then you can absolutely make it work. And you can be frugal as well in terms of your grocery shopping and how much you eat out until you move up in your career and make it work. Like, yeah, you can, I mean, it is an expensive city, but that shouldn't deter anyone from wanting to move here or live here. Only thing I will say though is if you are just visiting, so many of my friends who live outside of the city, or just people that I knew, people that I grew up with, family friends, have texted me to say, hey, where's an affordable hotel to stay in the city? And I'm like, ooh, it's really going to be tough to find an affordable hotel. If you are living here, yes, you can make it work, but if you're visiting here, you do have to know that it is going to be an expensive trip, just with all of the eating out, because the restaurants are just more costly here, and the hotels in general are as well. So unfortunately, if you're just visiting, you're going to have to just know that it is a more expensive city to visit. The next stereotype about the city is that it's very loud and that there's lots of noises when you're trying to sleep. And that is also a myth. I will say that is a myth. I feel like when you're growing up, everyone's seen this like either in like movies or shows, there's juxtaposition between somebody who lives in the countryside and it's completely silent. At nighttime, they're trying to sleep, they're in bed, it's quiet and they can sleep peacefully. And then they'll show like someone who lives in a city like New York and it's super loud, like sirens, people honking their horns, people talking loudly and yelling on the street, and then it's this always kind of busy, loud place, and that's just not true. I guess if you are maybe only in Midtown, then, and you're only say in like Times Square or something, then maybe that's always true. But other than that, you can completely get a good night's sleep. I live in a walk-up, and my windows face the street, and I don't have any disruptions at night at all. Yes, maybe there is like every so often, like a fire truck or a siren that comes through, but it's really not all the time, and you can get a peaceful sleep here. And as far as like honking horns and stuff, all of that noise I feel like is when they're just talking about Midtown. There's plenty of quiet streets throughout the city where it's very pleasant, and it's not this like loud crazy city vibe that movies and shows portray. The next one is that it's a very work-focused city, and I would say that is definitely true. When you compare New York to other cities around the world, say for example if you were to compare it to Paris, I feel like Paris has just a different kind of vibe. New York is like where people come to work, where it does attract a crowd of a lot of very ambitious, driven people who are looking to make their careers here. And so because of that, it is a very work-focused city, and a lot of companies have their headquarters here. Because of that, it is a very work-focused city, and like I said, there's a lot of people who live outside the city as well, who come in just to work and then leave and then go home to the suburbs or New Jersey or Long Island or Connecticut, wherever they live. So yeah, I would say that it really is a very work-focused city, and I would say that's something that, I mean, a lot of people, they come here for. But if you're looking for a vibe like Paris, where people are just sitting out in cafes, facing the street, just staring off for hours and reading a book, enjoying your cup of coffee, it's not that type of city. It's more of a fast-paced city. Like when you sit down at like a cafe or a restaurant, the waiter is trying to rush you through so that they can get the next table and the next one. Versus in other cities I know, especially like in Europe, I keep referring to Paris, but where they won't disrupt you as much and they'll let you sit there forever and just take your time. I mean, everyone, like, this is just stereotypes. Like, everyone who comes here has their own experience of the city and their own way of looking at the world, their own way of looking at things. So the next one is that the apartments are tiny. Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, especially if you want to live by yourself. Like, there are a lot of apartments that are just like, you're like, how is this even legal? It's that tiny. Like, there's somewhere they don't even have a bathroom. It's just one tiny box. But again, that just goes back to the fact that there's so many people that want to live here, so it's just the supply and demand, and so many people are willing to do it. But I love my tiny apartment, and there's so many ways that you can make it work. Like, I just live in this tiny little studio, and like, I got a pink couch and some pretty little gallery wall. Like, you can make it livable, and you can make it work for you if you want it, you know, if you're okay with the tiny apartment. And yeah, New Yorkers have just in general gotten used to it, honestly. Just gotten used to the fact that they probably won't have a washer and dryer in unit, and probably won't have a dishwasher, and there's probably going to be some little quirks about it. But I mean, hopefully, I mean, at least in like a general world, a normal year, you won't be spending that much time in your apartment anyways. So then the next myth is that New Yorkers are loud and outspoken. Exhibit A, I'm very quiet and not outspoken, and I live here, but I would say that a lot of New Yorkers are very outspoken. I had this friend in college who was talking about with her parents that, oh, she wanted to move to New York, and her mom said to her, no, like, she was like, those New York girls are gonna eat you up, like, they are so loud and, you know, and outspoken, and you're gonna get drowned out there. Going back to my point about the fact that there's all different types of people here, and that everyone from around the world can fit in because there's no one way of style, doing things, everything. But I will say, from people that I know that grew up here, it's not that, well, yeah, a lot of them are very loud and outgoing. That is a complete stereotype, by the way, just a total stereotype. Not everyone, just a stereotype. But I think it's just a different way of communicating. I've noticed that a lot of, especially the girls that I've met here, it's like the way that they communicate is just talking very quickly and interrupting each other, versus like the way that I grew up and the way that I learned to communicate was letting the other person finish first and then talking. But I've noticed that kind of the culture here that they grew up with was you're not clicking or you're not like bonding enough if you're not like quickly like da, 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 really excited and like interrupting each other. That's just one little difference that I found. But if I will just say out there, if anyone else is very quiet and not very outspoken, you can for sure come here. Do not let people deter you away from that. And then the very last stereotype is that dating is hard here. I have a boyfriend, and we actually met pretty soon after I moved to the city. So I wasn't single in the city for very long, but out of my friends that are single right now, I've heard more stories of them being frustrated with the dating scene here than they have heard stories of them being like, oh, it's so awesome and easy here. But I don't think that New York is any different than anywhere else in terms of dating. I mean, I feel like just in general, sometimes it takes a bit to find your perfect, person or just like a good quality person. What I think though actually makes it easier about the city is that there's so much going on here. There's so many restaurants and bars and things to do. There's like groups that you can meet up in, like teams where you play like a sport or something just for fun. I don't know, I think that there's just because of the fact that there's so much going on, there's more opportunities to meet people. So versus I think just sometimes in a small town, maybe if there isn't as much going on, maybe there isn't as many opportunities, plus there's a bigger pool of people here. So I mean, everyone's experience is of course different, but in general, I don't think that New York is any more difficult as far as dating goes than any other city or any other place. Also, I will say I know tons of people that are dating right now that met in the city and they're very happy, and I know people who have even gotten married. And so I don't know, I mean there's plenty of people that you can meet here. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that was exactly 10 stereotypes or myths about New York City. Did you guys agree with these? I know a lot of you guys actually do live here too, so tell me what you think. And on that note, of course, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. If below this video you see a little red subscribe button, that means you haven't subscribed yet, so definitely hit the little subscribe button. And check out the Fashion Squirrel as well over on Instagram. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Okay, bye.